Alien Romulus has been one of my most anticipated movies of 2024. The Alien movies might very well be my favorite movie franchise of all time, and I plan on covering the whole series on a later date. I seriously love these movies so much, but I really miss that the first one was the only horror movie, since all the other ones kind of moved more towards sci-fi action. I know some people consider Prometheus and Covenant as horror movies, but it isn't as strong a focus as it is in the original Alien. It also did have some promising details about how the director wouldn't be Ridley Scott this time, and instead a pure horror director, Fede Alvarez. A lot of people were worried about this, but this only made me more excited about the project. I think Fede Alvarez is a director that really understands horror and has a deep appreciation for those older, influential horror movies. Proof of this is in his remake for the first Evil Dead. I also think that due to Ridley's track record over the last few years not being great, it helped the movie immensely to have a new, experienced director breathe some life into this movie, with him moving back to the production side. When I heard that the people working on the practical effects were the same people from the very first Alien, I cannot express the euphoria I felt knowing that this movie was going to look incredible and not rely too much on CGI. It still has CGI and it's kind of up and down, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Here's a spoiler warning. I may or may not be revealing details about stuff that happens at all points in the movie, so discretion is advised. I saw this opening night and I absolutely loved it. It's exactly what I wanted going in, and even some things I didn't know I wanted. A lot of people have said this is the best Alien since Alien 2, and those people probably forgot that Prometheus came out. It's not perfect, but it does succeed in being a faithful love letter to all of the best parts of these movies. I don't know if I've seen a modern entry to a multi-decade series that is this in love with the source material. You can see how much Fede Alvarez wanted to show this affection in just the first few scenes. The first act of this film is a group of underprivileged, broke factory workers trying to steal equipment from the company they work for so they can escape their contracts and take a vacation. This showed me the understanding of the way the first Alien attempted to de-glamorize space. I'll talk about this more in its own video, but Alien was an important movie because it was an attempt to develop the idea that space would not be an escape from all earthly problems, and instead an extension of them. And this is something that the rest of the series seemed to forget was a central theme. I'm so happy that it was able to frame the story of this one too. It's also a pretty similar setup to that of the first one, with them investigating some ship that's no longer in use. I think this film really succeeds in making a lot of the stuff we have already seen in previous installments very glamorized and new. Like the idea of the obligatory chestburster scene, except getting an X-ray shot of it happening is so goddamn cool. The whole last 20 minutes ties in a lot of stuff from previous movies, but turns it into that great horror like the first one. The character writing is serviceable, if not a little basic. Most people in the cast outside of Rain and Andy are relatively flat, mainly with one or two identifiable traits. I've seen a lot of people point this as a reason for criticism, and while I do wish some of the characters were a bit less surface level, I do see it as the film respecting the intelligence of the audience. Everyone knows that this is an Alien movie, and everyone also knows what happens to the majority of the cast in an Alien movie. It's not trying to trick you into thinking everyone will make it out unscathed. There are deaths that are genuinely shocking because they come at times that are believed to be the falling action, and the characters that do make it farther do get more development as time goes on. I just like that for the sake of brevity, that they don't waste a ton of time breaking down dispensable characters. I think this strategy in the long run will help with the rewatchability of Romulus. Something else that will help with the rewatchability is the effects in the movie. There are a few moments where the effects start looking like a video game, but it's also at some of the most visually ambitious points in the film. I still think that if you aren't able to do it well, then you shouldn't do it at all, but it is made up by the fact that if Dune hadn't come out this year, Romulus would be without a doubt the best looking movie of the year. The android with the CGI face looks a bit uncanny, but it really doesn't bother me because I think it adds to his inhuman nature, as well as the fact that he's kind of malfunctioning and his face is being weird because, you know, he's a torso. And it's made up for by how incredible the movie looks most of the time. I don't want to comment on them resurrecting the actor from the first one who passed away, because I really don't know enough about the situation to comment on it. A lot of people are upset by it, and I just want to say I get it. It does feel a bit gross as a concept, but it wasn't super distracting for me. The incredible mix of practical effects and CGI the majority of the time leads to Romulus at points looking as beautiful as Interstellar, and then in repetition you will see some of the most convincing and horrifying body horror in any sci-fi movie. I already talked about the incredible chestburster scene, but just some basic stuff, like characters who have acid fall on them or people getting killed by xenomorphs, are done so well that it takes these relatively well-used concepts in the series and breathes new life into them. And even new interesting body horror, like giving birth to a xenomorph human hybrid, is absolutely insane and horrifying to watch. And the performances from all the actors sell how awful everything is. Kaylee Spaney is a phenomenal actress. She was great in Civil War and she's great here as well. They do a great job at making us care about her and her brother, as well as the other two siblings, which are essentially the main four protagonists of the group. David Johnson easily gives the best performance of the film. Synthetic people is an issue in practically all of these movies because it helps drive home the theme that humans are not the top of the evolutionary ladder anymore, a theme this movie still carries through with. But Andy gives a great reversal on that previous idea, with him being such a good actor that he can play a completely unfeeling, cold, calculating computer, as well as a kind-hearted, timid robot that acts more human than almost any of them. The color in this movie, and especially the use of this movie's favorite color, which you probably know from the poster already, adds a special level of dread to the movie. Most of these movies have a color. The first one is green, the second one's blue, Prometheus is white, Covenant is a lot of washed out tones of gray for some reason. It's amazing to me that it took 45 years to get an Alien movie that's main color was red. It just feels so right. The fuel storage scene is an especially good example of this, with all the facehuggers swimming through the water in that red lit room. I mean, it's just so ominous that it seems like a no-brainer. I honestly wish they had gone harder on the red, because every time it shows up, it has some of the best scenes, and the atmosphere that it creates is so perfect. The best part of this movie for setting the atmosphere, though, has to be the music, which might be the best score out of the whole series. It just so perfectly encapsulates what a sci-fi horror action movie should have. It's got some intense synth industrial sounds for the more in-your-face threatening horror, but it also has some loud, ominous choir vocals that sound like they were ripped straight from 2001. And this is some of my favorite stuff in sci-fi, and in horror in general. These moments of existential dread and those long droning vocals that sound like the world is falling apart, this really is the part that Alien Romulus shines on its own. For the rest of the really great parts of the movie, they all come from another source. The antithesis to the story as well as the horror comes from the original Alien and goes for a flashier version of relatively the same subject matter. The turn to a more action-centric sci-fi movie is from Alien 2, but with the use of gravity being an interesting new variable, and the themes of birth, human anatomy, evolution of human beings, Darwinism, and the origins of man are all taken from and expanded from Prometheus. I mean, they make reference to it in the movie. I do also see this, though, as the large shortcoming of this film. Almost all the elements of this movie draw inspiration from earlier entries that already did these things in fantastic ways. So while this is the reason I love the movie, it does make it harder to stand out among the 6 previous movies. That is, until the last 20 minutes of the movie, and all those criticisms go away, except for the CGI sometimes. I know I already gave a spoiler warning, but I really don't want to ruin this for the people that haven't already seen it. The last part of this movie is such a good example of payoff. It gives payoff on things that you forgot about earlier in the film. The entire movie up to this point was to make sure that the end sequence worked perfectly. A bunch of loose threads are set up all throughout the movie, even up until right before the turn, and then it has a really loud, action-packed false climax that'll make you forget a lot of the unresolved ideas. It worked on me, because at the end I thought it was going to be over, and I forgot that the girl injected that black goo into her neck. And then everything goes absolutely crazy, and her giving birth to a horrible xenomorph fetus chimera makes the end of this movie so crazy and leads to some of the most tense parts of any sci-fi movie that I've ever watched. Just the presence of it being there gives a lot of thematic payoff, with all the stuff from Prometheus about giving us life, and the creature having a resemblance to the being in Prometheus. It's one of the strongest endings to a sci-fi horror I've seen. This whole movie is centered around drawing inspiration from what has come before. There's a special care taken to honor the legacy of this franchise. A lot of people who maybe aren't as inclined to these movies may see it as a point of criticism, and I can understand why, because it can definitely be excessive. Like, I don't need Andy quoting Alien 2. Even the ending is remarkably similar to the last encounter with the xenomorph from the first one, and it can be seen as unoriginal. But I think this does a remarkable job at taking so much previously covered subject matter and topics, but also making them feel new and revitalized. This is the best type of sequel for a series, one that really values what came before and leverages that to give it new contextual meaning. Alien Romulus is a sequel that draws so much inspiration, but through its love of the series is able to also become something new and great. So maybe it's just because I'm absolutely obsessed with these movies, but I just can't help but love this one. I mean, it feels like it was made for people that adore them. People like me and Fede Alvarez, who will appreciate this as an homage to all the great parts of Alien. I'm sure a lot of people would call this movie unoriginal, but I see it as a film that is aware of the series that it is representing and cares about doing it justice. This is an Alien movie with some great horror, action, camera work, practical effects, and subtextual meaning while also being fun and thrilling. I can confidently recommend this movie to anyone that has enjoyed an Alien movie before. It may not be for everyone, but it's definitely for the fans of these movies, and I love it. Please see Alien Romulus and decide for yourself. Thank you guys for watching.